Now I want to get in trouble out here. This is Trump, everything, and the sheriff lives next door.
As somebody that really hates rich people, I could tell you, like, that's tantamount to a slur. Hello and welcome to the Demi Show. Today we will be talking about Mr. Aubrey Drake Graham, or better known as Drake. Yes, we're going to be having a conversation about Drake and the release of his newest project, Iceman, Habiti, as well as Maid of Honor. We're also going to be examining this conversation that I've seen, bubbling up in the zeitgeist about Drake's politics. And I want to go ahead and use this video as a way to not only examine what Drake's politics potentially could be or what they potentially could not be, but more so to also examine what I think is the main issue with Drake that I don't see a lot of people talking about. Over the last couple of weeks, and I would say honestly over the last couple of months, people have been trying to figure out whether or not Drake is MAGA. Especially if you think about the fact that his former label mate and his former mentor both are individuals that support the fascists in the White House. And I think at this moment where Drake's music and Drake himself is having a resurgence within the conversation, within the zeitgeist and within the discourse, and with so many people now re-engaging with Drake's art, whether in a positive or negative light, there's been a lot of discourse as to whether or not the sixth god himself may potentially be aligning himself with the fascists in the White House. Now, I want to go ahead and do two things. First, I want to break down why exactly some individuals believe that Drake is MAGA, and then I want to go ahead and examine what are some of the things within Drake's politics that may push back against this notion. I'll go ahead and provide my analysis as to why I genuinely think whether or not Drake is MAGA or a liberal, the main problem with him is that he's a capitalist, similar to Beyonce's husband, Jay-Z. Drake is an uber capitalist. As somebody that really hates rich people, I could tell you, like, that's tantamount to a slur. Well, that was three things. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and examine the Vulture article, where I most likely will end up crashing out on hip-hop media. If you're interested in more conversations about politics and how it intersects with hip-hop and pop culture, please feel free to go ahead and like this video. Also, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. And also, please feel free to leave some comments below and also to watch my other videos. If you are unable to have nuanced conversations about Aubrey Drake Graham, this may not be the video for you. It doesn't mean that I don't have other videos for you. It just means that this specific video is not for you. But if you do want to have a conversation, then you are obviously most welcome. Section 1. The MAGA-ification of Drake. First, let's go ahead and examine, why do people think Drake is MAGA? Well, Drake recently released Iceman, Habiti, and Maid of Honor. And as the White House is bound to do, they decided to take the cover of Iceman and add a MAGA chain. Because of course they did. Based off of some of the conversations that I've heard and based off of some of the things I've seen, I think a lot of this comes from the fact that Drake himself is somebody that has been right-wing coded. There's a few things that people have cited or pointed to as to why Drake is potentially MAGA. The first thing that I've heard from a lot of people is, have you listened to his fucking music? The nigga is like habitually a misogynist. On his collab project with 21 Savage, Her Loss, Drake uses that project as a way to criticize Megan Thee Stallion and as a way to criticize Serena Williams, his husband. Whether in instances where Drake is directly attacking women, a la Megan Thee Stallion or Rihanna, or even Serena Williams by proxy, Drake has this tendency to always bring in women into his problems with other men. And that just shows me that in his competition with other men, Drake views women as chess pieces to be moved on his board to gain access or gain power in comparison to other men. Because somebody explained to me why we couldn't just smack Alexis without using Serena. Like, yeah, Serena is an obvious party to this dynamic, but you're able to connect that dot without having to bring in Serena Williams. You hear me? Drake's music sometimes sounds like the men who are on the other side of the flued out conversation that the city girls and female rappers talk about. These extremely wealthy men who view women in a very disposable manner because of their wealth and their wealth accumulation. One of my favorite Drake projects is Some Sexy Songs for You. I fucking love Some Sexy Songs for You. But I do want to admit, it is definitely a project that could be better named as Some Sexy. Drake makes what I like to consider manosphere music, or better known as quote unquote high value man trademark. music, in the sense that a lot of the music on there is Drake just harping on the fact that he's extremely wealthy and that the women around him must act accordingly to his wealth. On one of the songs, and I don't know if it's Crying in Chanel or another song, Drake literally talks about how he spent so much money on this woman and she still won't give access to him, or she won't still give him exactly what he wants. So even though I like some sexy songs for you, there's obviously a sense of misogyny.
Drake was always partaking in, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm not like the other niggas misogyny throughout his career. But I think one of the main reasons why he supercharged it is because he saw that that was becoming the new market.
Whether Drake is making 2008 recession in the background love songs, or whether it's 2025 with fascism in the background, right? Over time, Drake's music has started to sound a little bit more manosphere-ish. And then on top of it, the things that Drake himself has said, like if he's making music that feeds into the specific type of manosphere, very pro-patriarchy view of womanhood, then obviously this nigga must be MAGA. Another argument towards Mr. Aubrey Dre Graham in regards to his potential politics is the fact that he's aligning himself with well-known right-wingers. Somebody like, what's that white nigga name that does country music that looks like Shane Gillis? Mind you, I actually kind of like country music too. So him, Morgan Wallen. When Drake came out with Morgan Wallen, people were highlighting the fact that Morgan Wallen himself is somebody that has leaned into right-wing republicanism, as well as the fact that Drake has aligned himself with Akademiks, Adin Ross.
Specifically in regards to Adin Ross and DJ Akademiks, these are two individuals that are, Drake has been seen with. These are two individuals that Drake has interacted with. And both of these people happen to be prominent Trump supporters, right? Like, Donald Trump was on Adin Ross's stream, and Adin Ross literally introduced the fascists to his very impressionable audience. Same thing with Akademiks, except I think Akademiks did it with Donald Trump Jr. Both Akademiks and Adin Ross helped Donald Trump become president. They used their platforms, they encouraged their audience to support Trump.
If you look at the Adin Ross connection specifically, that is directly tied to the fact that Drake is a partner for Stake. And because Drake is a partner for Stake, and Stake has a partnership with the platform Kick, therefore Drake is on Adin Ross's stream to push gambling.
You'll see these rappers go on his platform and without batting an eyelash, because to them, it's like, oh, well, I'm making money. Do you not understand that, like, who Adin Ross is? I don't feel like I'm saying anything crazy, but I feel like anti-blackness mixed with capitalism equates to bad juju magumbo.
Like, honestly, I would argue that Drake's capitalism aids and abets in a lot of the other critiques that individuals have for him. 1 + 1 may not equal 2, but it's equaling 1.99999. And we might have to round up. And this has led to a lot of people examining Drake's politics by proxy.
In this section, I'll do a quick speed round in regards to some of the other things people have pointed out as to why they believe Drake's politics may be more aligned with Donald Trump. First, if you look at 2024, Drake was accused of some of the most heinous allegations. And then we have in 2026, where our entire government is filled with predators. Yeah. Entire ruling class is just predators. And as we saw in 2024 with the entire theme of Not Like Us, outside of some of the cultural critiques, was primarily about Drake and his weirdo allegations. 2.
A couple of weeks ago, I think I saw a post that said Drake was following Donald Trump on social media, on Instagram, I believe. And this was a big deal, as to some it confirmed that Drake was MAGA. We later found out that Drake just follows the president account, like the POTUS account, and then whenever it changes from one person to another person, he's still there.
3. I am aware of the fact that Drake has been planning this project for some time, but I do want to go ahead and speak on one of the main things that I have been perturbed about, and it does have a lot to do with the cultural context we live in, right? Like, what did Kamala Harris say? We live within a context. And because we live within a context, it does feel weird that the biggest male artist has a project named Iceman. This is something that I personally have always been uncomfortable with when it comes to Drake's album name. Even though I understand that this is something that he's been planning for some time, I know this is all tied to the Frozen LLC stuff. And I do want to go ahead and just say, yes, that this is very much me being American-centered. However, Drake is an artist that has benefited off of American culture. You know, that was one of the main critiques that we saw in 2024. Drake is somebody that has benefited from Black American culture specifically. And watching one of the biggest celebrities in the world name his project Iceman at this very, very distraught time. So the reason why I think some people are coming to the conclusion that Drake may potentially be MAGA is because of those compounding factors, whether because of Drake's perceived anti-Blackness, is his actual anti-Blackness, whether it's Drake's soft boy misogyny or outright misogyny. It's like one thing plus another thing plus another thing. While some have been able to cite other instances where Drake's politics directly clash with the politics that, you know, MAGA espouses. Let's go ahead and examine why some people have pushed back against the idea of Drake being MAGA. Now, before I continue, I do want to emphasize that I have not actually listened to Iceman, Habiti, or Maid of Honor. I'm probably going to listen to these songs this week or probably next week or maybe never. I don't know. Like, I'm living under fascism. I don't know. Section 2. But he's Canadian. One of the first videos that I made on the internet was a video examining Drake's politics, but I ended up taking that video down because I'm gonna be very fucking honest. The editing was terrible, and I spent a majority of the time breaking down Canadian politics because obviously I did. I don't want to go ahead and spend an hour breaking down Canadian politics, but the politics that we're currently seeing in Canada do not translate one to one. And Drake himself is Canadian, as we learned in 2024, because I emphasize that to say that Drake's politics are not one-to-one comparison with the politics we see in America. Canada's political system is different. Drake, based off of some of the interactions that he has had with politicians, seems to be closer to the NDP. So it would be very stupid of him to go ahead and fully align himself with American national politics, especially American national fascist politics that directly harm the country he's from. That Canadian politics specifically is diametrically opposed to American politics, and that basically the face of Canada aligning himself with MAGA politics would be really stupid. So I would argue that Drake most likely isn't MAGA just because, again, it would be stupid for him as the face of Canada to align himself with a politician that directly is diametrically opposed to the sovereignty of Canada. But again, as I emphasized, Drake's a billionaire. 2022 on Drake's song Spin About You, he speaks about women's autonomy and agency after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. In 2022, this falls on the backdrop of Roe v. Wade being overturned by the Supreme Court. And this is one of the few times that you hear Drake directly speak out in regards to American politics, and the way that it's positioned in the song and the way that it's positioned on the project is obviously Drake would care about Roe v. Wade being overturned. This speaks to how even though Drake doesn't speak out directly about his politics, he does have moments where he shows you, whether through his music or through some of his statements, where his politics may potentially lie.
Drake just signed a letter along with many other celebrities calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, asking President Biden to support a ceasefire in Gaza. I have critiqued Drake for the way that he has dealt with the Megan Thee Stallion issue, but that's neither here nor there. Today, I'm not here to critique Drake. Today, I am here to say good job, Aubrey Graham. You did an excellent job by signing this letter. You have Drake who signed a ceasefire letter in 2023. And I know for a lot of people that may be like, okay, what does that mean? But in that moment in 2023, this was a very big deal. And Drake also received a lot of backlash from the Jewish community because Drake is the biggest Jewish celebrity in the world, if you didn't know that. Right after Drake advocated for a ceasefire, he was automatically met with a lot of backlash from the American Zionist community, and would be lambasted by some of America's favorite Zionists for turning his back on the Jewish community. Some people are going to come out to you and say, well, signing a letter isn't anything. Anybody can sign a letter. Not when you Drake. When you Drake, signing a letter is high stakes. When you Drake, they're going to scrutinize the letter. They're going to hyper-analyze the letter. They're going to check every word to see if they can get you hemmed up in something, particularly when it's something controversial. When I say they, I mean media. Also, there are many people, particularly people who are strong advocates of Israel, who would say that we don't want a ceasefire, that a ceasefire is dangerous, that a ceasefire is irresponsible, that a ceasefire is bad for Israel. I mean, you have people like Rabbi Shmuley, a very famous, very popular, well-known rabbi in America, maybe one of the most, if not the most well-known rabbi in America. And Rabbi Shmuley is saying, how dare you, Drake, sign a ceasefire letter when there are still hostages? How dare you sign a ceasefire letter when Israel has not completed its goal. Now, he's saying that because Drake is Jewish. And he's saying, as a Jew, you should have more allegiance, Drake.
I bring this up to say that even though I believe that Drake could have did more in regards to the pro-Palestinian movement, he did receive a lot of backlash within his mother's community. Let me set aside my issues with philanthropic, quote-unquote, billionaires. Just on the basics, he could have spoken out more. He could have donated more. Drake is somebody that's known for being, quote-unquote, philanthropic. He could have invested a lot of money into these resources, into these organizations, into these MENA institutes, into these Middle Eastern, North African institutes. Drake could have used his cultural and social capital as a way to highlight the movement, as a way to direct resources towards the movement. And I know he was going through something in 2024, but you're Drake. But y'all telling me Drake don't have an accountant? And then if you want to do my whole evil supervillain plan, but Drake is a soft power export, he has enough social and political capital to influence on this issue if he wanted to. That's what makes him different than other celebrities. He's fucking Drake. Like, during the entire battle between Drake and Kendrick, the ADL did not even jump in once to weaponize Drake's identity. And if you know anything about the Chronically Online ADL, personally, I honestly think that has a lot to do with the fact that Drake is pro-Palestinian. Somebody let me know if the ADL has ever spoken on Drake. He's also friends with 40, who is very pro-Palestinian, very loud about his pro-Palestinian advocacy. Now, even though I still haven't listened to either of the projects, I do know that Drake, on one of his songs, called out DJ Khaled specifically for not being more pro-Palestinian, even though DJ Khaled is Palestinian. And I think that is good. I think it's good and all that Drake is using his platform to call out individuals like Mr. Khaled. But again, goes to my point that Drake can use his platform, this issue, as well as a plethora of other issues. But he actively chooses not to speak on certain things because he's a billionaire. That's the answer, because he's a billionaire. And he cares more about his own corporate interest as not only an individual, but as Drake trademark the corporation. When Drake initially signed the ceasefire letter in 2023, this was more of a polarized issue. As time has gone on, the pro-Palestinian movement has continued to grow. But in 2023, and if we're being honest, the majority of the advocacy that is being done on behalf of Palestinians is primarily done by the left. Therefore, this example, as well as a few of the other examples that we have talked about in this section, directly clashes with this idea of Drake being a quote-unquote traditional MAGA voter advocate person. Honestly, outside of Drake being a capitalist, I also think that Drake fits into this very heterodox version of American politics that we see. Section 3, is he MAGA or is he just a billionaire? And also, is there even a difference? Because Drake himself has never spoken up about what his specific politics are and whether or not he aligns with the donkeys or with the elephants, we are forced to examine his politics through secondary and tertiary sources. And I think what is probably best to help us understand his politics is to view Mr. Aubrey Drake Graham through the lens of a capitalist. Yeah. View Aubrey Drake Graham. Why am I saying Aubrey Drake Graham like I know this man? View Drake through the lens of a billionaire and through the lens of a capitalist, similar to how we view individuals like Jay-Z, Beyonce, and all the other Black billionaires that we have to exist with in this world, because God forbid we live in a world with Medicare for all. I am not a fan of billionaires. I don't like billionaires. I don't like rich people. In my previous video, I compared Drake's politics to the politics of somebody like Marc Cuban, in the sense that Drake's politics move with whatever is most beneficial for his bank account. So on one end, you may see Drake advocating for women's rights on songs like Spin About You. And then on other songs or in other instances, Drake may be aligning himself more with right-wing manosphere figures. He's willing to align himself with anything that is financially beneficial. And sometimes that means aligning himself with right-wingers, and that sometimes means aligning himself with left-wingers, because he most likely believes in the same bullshit that billionaires believe in lower taxes and et cetera, et cetera. His politics are automatically going to be coded right, similar to some of the billionaires that that we've seen in American politics and even in Canadian politics. And because billionaires are terrible people and because billionaires are greedy, this is what's led to some of the decisions that Drake has made in regards to who he aligns himself with. Like even during the beef, while Drake was actively suing UMG and by proxy the NFL, he released merch with the NFL that he's willing to align with corporations that were actively kicking his back end. By viewing Drake as the capitalist and as the billionaire he is, we'll have a better understanding as to why he makes the political decisions he makes. Because if you only look at it through like party lines, you may get this very weird brown mess of like what his politics are. Drake has touched on politics here and there, but he's never spoken fully about whether or not he fits into the binary politics that we see within America. And I don't think Drake has sent a cease and desist to get the White House to pull down the MAGA picture. Hello, editing Demi here. Before we transition into my analysis and my critique of hip hop media, I want to go ahead and just have a conversation about the posting of the picture online, because I have heard conversations from people who are, trying to advocate on behalf of Drake, so a la Akademiks. And then I also have heard other people who are pushing back against Drake and in regards to the cultural legitimacy, right, that this specific post from the White House could lend to the White House. And I want to go ahead and speak on this because I think, lucky for everyone, I am obsessed with American politics, and I am also somebody that has been chronicling the Trump administration's torment of us on the timeline. What we're seeing currently with the Trump administration posting Drake's album cover with like the fucking AI slop falls in a long line of the Trump administration using pop culture and hip hop specifically as a way to try to engage very impressionable fans or people who aren't really tapped into politics. Like a majority of people are not really into politics or don't want to consume politics. So they're just hoping like, a fan won't be paying attention and they'll just see the White House and they'll be like, oh my God, the White House is talking about my favorite rapper, and they'll go ahead and retweet it, right? Not really thinking that much about it. They'll end up retweeting propaganda on behalf of an administration that has a 37% approval rating. That's why I was kind of confused when like Akademiks was like, this is free promo. I'm like, Trump has like the worst approval rating of all time. Like, but again, it goes to the fact that Akademiks is in that world, right? Akademiks is MAGA. So to him, it makes sense. But when you look at the majority of the American populace, they're not on the side of Donald Trump. So the Trump administration is trying to use different ways, right? AI slop being the main one, to try to engage with people who are just impressionable or people who are just passively consuming politics. We saw this at the height of the ICE raids when the Trump administration was using different hip hop songs, different hip hop artists over these very sadistic ICE videos. So you would see like human beings being crammed into places, abuelitas getting kidnapped, and then it would be like a fucking Jay-Z song, or a SZA song, or the Baby song, or even a Sabrina Carpenter song. Like I think they used a Taylor song as well. And the reason why they're doing this, like if I'm being very honest, is because they're banking on a lot of these celebrities being fucking punanis. They're banking on these celebrities being punanis and not willing to push back. Like I've made this joke a few times when talking to people about how Drake is like a corporation, right? And similar to what we've seen with other corporations, a la Target, a la basically every corporation, niggas are willing to be quiet because what did Michael Jordan say? Republicans buy shoes too. Or that some of these celebrities actually agree with them. Like in regards to Miss Nicki Minaj herself, right? Formerly Miss Nicki Lewinsky, right now, MAGA Minaj herself, Nick started engaging with their content. Like she started retweeting and like fangirling in their comment sections because obviously Nicki Minaj would fangirl for a fascist. And then on top of it, even if a celebrity pushes back, like we saw with Sabrina Carpenter and SZA, they're using that as further fuel for their culture wars. The Trump administration has been using hip hop as a vehicle to make themselves look cool for the last decade. And this is another instance of that. And if you ask me, I would have personally had this shit taken down because Like, the average Trump supporter who's like 70 years old in the middle of fucking Oklahoma is not going to be twerking to shebang. Section 4, Drake, hip hop media's cash cow.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them. You can do anything.
I recently read the Vulture article that talks about Drake potentially, quote unquote, flooding the zone. Now, before I can even talk about if Drake is flooding the zone, I first need to explain what exactly is flooding the zone. So the flooding the zone tactic is a tactic that was coined by Steve Bannon in around the first half of the Trump administration. And what that specific tactic is to put as much bullshit out there for the American public to be overwhelmed, to flood the media with as much bullshit as possible. So therefore, it makes it hard for the average person to be able to keep up exactly with what's happening in American politics. This was deployed as a way to distract the American public from the Access Hollywood tape that came out in the first part around 2015, 2016, and it had Donald Trump talking about grabbing women by the private parts. We've recently seen a lot of this when it comes to Donald Trump's corruption. So every day you'll see a new story about how much corruption Donald Trump is participating in, whether it's Donald Trump trying to sue us, the American public, for $10 billion and basically trying to steal $10 billion from us, or if it's Donald Trump doing insider trading.
Yeah, Citi today takes it to 130.
Yeah, but the president, U.S. government got in, he could sell it and
yes,
give that
and
the
according
number.
to the filings, the president's been trading some intel in the quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, trade.
Got nothing to say about it?
Well, yeah.
All right, don't worry. We're not having technical difficulties here, everybody, but we got to go.
Jim, we'll see you tonight. Mad Money, 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
All of these stories are compounded together to exhaust me and you. So why are we talking about flood the zone? Well, the reason for this is because there was a Vulture article that was released specifically in regards to Drake's projects, to the 3 projects that Drake released. And the Vulture article zone that Drake is releasing all these songs so that way he can kind of overwhelm us with mediocrity, and then we, the audience, because we're so overwhelmed with the amount of songs that we don't really have time to critically analyze his music. Now, I know a lot of people love to argue that there's no bias in journalism. That's a fucking lie. Everybody has a bias. I have a bias. You have a bias. The nigga that's writing this has a bias. So let's just go ahead and put that bias out there.
The article is called Drake is Flooding the Zone by Herschel Panya, a Vulture staff writer who covers comedy. Why is a nigga that covers comedy covering hip hop? Let me not get in my critique of white media and how it disrespects hip hop. I'm not saying a nigga that covers comedy can't have hip hop opinions, obviously. Like, everybody can have hip hop opinions. But that's not your specialty. In your little descriptor, they didn't put a nigga that covers hip hop. They cover a nigga that covers comedy. Anywho, the Vulture article says, in August 2024, a few months after the release of Kendrick Lamar's diss track Not Like Us, Drake tried to distract the public from his humiliation by data dumping 100 gigabytes of content onto the internet. The checkmate is supposed to be, because 100 gigs flopped, Drake started picking up flooding the zone from the Trump administration. And I just think that's not how that works.
So I understand where this journalist is coming from in regards to him saying that he believes that Drake is flooding the zone. Because if you look at it, yeah, technically Drake is flooding the zone in that sense. Like, he's putting out a lot of content, he's putting out a lot of music. But flooding the zone itself is inherently political, as it is directly tied to fascism.
So I say this to say, I don't think the reason why Drake is releasing 43 songs is because Drake is trying to mimic Steve Bannon. I think the reason why Drake is releasing 43 songs is because Drake is make the most of the attention economy and is also somebody that understands that within this current zeitgeist, he needs to compete with all of these fucking clippers. Drake historically is an artist that releases a beaucoup amount of music.
I would argue that this follows the pattern of Drake's music over the last decade plus. Drake has historically been known as an artist that drops a lot of fucking music. This is one of the major critiques that people had towards Drake during the battle. The fact that he is quote unquote a McDonald's artist. Like you usually hear this critique of individuals like Drake or Taylor Swift. You know, one of the main critiques towards that was the fact that Drake put out a lot of music and that led to a dilution of the quality. So if you are having these conversations in 2024, what you're seeing in 2026 is just a progression of the same argument we were having in 2024. Like, I would argue the reason why we're seeing Drake quote unquote flood the zone is less so because of Drake's potential political leading, and this nigga is going to do anything in his power to make sure that he is number one, and therefore make sure that he reclaims his spot as the number one most streamed artist after 2024.
I don't want to make this video about my critique about hip-hop media because I swear to God, I will go on a 3-hour tangent about hip-hop media. I think this is where sometimes hip-hop conversations and discourse get on my nerves because sometimes they're held in a vacuum, as though we don't have the ability to look to history. And when you look into history, what you see is that Drake is an artist historically that is known for dropping a lot of fucking music. Mind you, this was a major critique towards Drake in 2024. As many critiques as I have for Drake, I also have a lot of critiques about how hip-hop media covers Drake, right? You're starting your argument about how Drake is using flooding the zone, which is obviously tied directly to the fascist within the White House, and you're doing parasocial fan writing. That's why I say that bias is something that needs to be talked about more within hip-hop. Sometimes with conversations around Drake and with conversations with certain people that are, not beloved by the zeitgeist, we do get into this rat race to try to define them. I mean, Drake is an extremely polarizing figure. We do exist within the attention economy. Niggas got to get clicks. Understandable. Everybody got to get the best SEO. I would argue that the framing of this article from the get-go is where I have contention with. Because I think what this article is trying to frame is that Drake is copying MAGA tactics, when in reality, I think what I get from Drake is capitalist. So therefore, Drake is going to try to make a lot of capital. There's actually a good article to be written from this, and I think it ties into the last sentence that this nigga said, which was, the emptiness, the vagueness, the dismissiveness that we have started feeling towards hip-hop music, and that I would hope that somebody at Vulture could go ahead and further examine. And it's something that I even want to talk a little bit more about, which is the nihilism that exists within hip-hop. And I honestly think that's why Drake released 43 songs, because of that nihilistic feeling, because of that feeling of vagueness, because we don't feel as though music means anything anymore, because we just see it as a commodity to be traded back and forth, even with hip-hop, something that used to argue that it was distinctly different than other manufactured genres. I would have personally came from either the capitalism lens or I would have came from that lens, and how that ties into this very misconstrued version of what is actual hip-hop. Section 5, the end.
And now I want to emphasize this because I do know sometimes niggas watch videos without taking the full, thesis of the video. And the full thesis of this video is that Drake hasn't really talked about whether or not he's a donkey or an elephant. But what I can gauge is that Drake, similar to other billionaires, has a hodgepodge of different politics. And those politics are most likely derived from the fact that Drake, and as a billionaire, is trying to accumulate more wealth. And that's why you don't have like a simple linear view of Drake's politics. On one hand, his politics may read pretty liberal. And then on the other hand, his politics may read pretty MAGA. And in the end, that means that Drake is a billionaire. Whether or not Drake is MAGA or a liberal, there still needs to be a critique of his capitalism. Because Drake's capitalism and his need to be the best capitalist of all capitalists is what drives him to make some of the stupid decisions that we as fans and some critics have harped on. Because his incessant need to be the best capitalist of all time ties directly into some of the other critiques that people, whether fans or not, have about Drake and the amount of music that he's making and some of the connections and community that he's trying to build. I emphasize that Drake and Jay-Z are similar because I would argue that both of these individuals, whether liberal leaning or right wing leaning, both of these individuals still have the same problem.
So yeah, hopefully that gives us a better understanding of Drake's politics, and hopefully that provides some type of framework as to how we discuss Drake's politics, because I think similar to a lot of other billionaires and similar to a lot of other celebrities, these motherfuckers care more about money than they care about actual political ideology or actual political framework. They just care about whatever fills their pockets. And I think that's what we're seeing with Mr. Iceman himself. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and leave them below. Please feel free to also like this video.
Okay, thank you so much for watching this episode of Is He MAGA or Is He a Billionaire?